When I moved into Oakwood Estates 6 months ago, I was looking forward to a quiet suburban life. After 8 years of high-stress fieldwork as a federal agent, I'd managed to secure a desk position that allowed me to settle down somewhere permanent. The neighborhood seemed perfect, well-maintained homes, good school district, planning ahead, and a reasonable commute to the field office. I deliberately chose a modest house rather than something flashy. In my line of work, you learn to keep a low profile. I drive an unmarked government vehicle, nothing fancy, just a black Ford sedan with government plates that most people wouldn't look twice at. The car has some modifications. Reinforced body, bulletproof glass, specialized communications equipment, and a hidden compartment for my service weapon and tactical gear. Standard issue for my position, nothing special. My first encounter with Karen Wilkinson happened 3 days after I moved in. I was unpacking boxes in my garage when she appeared in my driveway, clipboard in hand, pink cardigan perfectly pressed, blonde bob so immaculately styled it barely moved in the breeze. "Hello there." Her voice was honey-sweet but with an unmistakable edge. "I'm Karen Wilkinson, president of the Oakwood Estates Homeowners Association. Welcome to our little paradise." I introduced myself simply as Alex, offering my hand, which she shook with manicured fingers. "I just wanted to personally deliver your welcome packet and go over a few quick things. We're very particular about maintaining our community standards here." For the next 20 minutes, Karen walked me through a binder of rules thicker than some case files I've worked on. No parking on the street overnight. No exterior modifications without approval. Lawn must be mowed weekly. Trash bins can only be visible on collection day. Holiday decorations must be removed within 5 days of the holiday. The list went on and on. "And of course, all vehicles must be kept in the garage when not in use," she said, glancing pointedly at my sedan parked in the driveway. "My garage is full of boxes right now," I explained. "Once I'm unpacked, the car will go inside." Karen's smile tightened just a fraction. "We do have a strict 72-hour grace period for new residents. After that, vehicles must be garaged or they're subject to towing." "Understood," I said, though I was already wondering what I'd gotten myself into. "Perfect." She handed me the binder. "Oh, and we have a neighborhood barbecue this weekend. Mandatory attendance for new residents." As she walked away, I noticed her taking pictures of other houses on the street. I made a mental note to get my boxes unpacked ASAP. Little did I know that Karen had already marked me as a troublemaker. 2 weeks after moving in, I returned home late from work. We'd been tracking a money laundering operation, and I'd spent 16 hours straight analyzing financial records. I was exhausted and had a splitting headache. I pulled into my driveway at 11:30 p.m., grabbed my laptop bag, and trudged inside, forgetting to open the garage and put the car away. The next morning, I woke to a loud knocking. Opening the door in my pajamas, I found Karen standing there with another HOA board member, a thin man who seemed uncomfortable being there. "Good morning, Alex." Karen's voice was far too chipper for 7:30 a.m. "I noticed your vehicle was parked in the driveway overnight. That's violation number 1. She handed me a pink slip of paper. "This is just a warning, but next time it'll be a $150 fine." I apologized, explaining I'd had a late night at work and simply forgotten. "We all have jobs, Alex," Karen replied with a condescending smile. "But rules are rules. Everyone follows them, no exceptions." Later that day, I dutifully moved my car into the garage. Problem solved, or so I thought. Over the next few weeks, I received violation notices for grass being 0.5 inches too tall. I was away on a 3-day work trip. A small American flag displayed, without proper approval. Blinds visible from the street that weren't the approved eggshell white color. Bringing my trash bins in 45 minutes after the allowed window. Each infraction came with Karen personally delivering the notice, always with that same tight smile. I paid the fines without complaint, trying to stay under the radar. In my profession, you learn to pick your battles. Things escalated when I had a few colleagues over for dinner one evening. We were discussing a case, in vague terms, and I suppose our 3 cars in the driveway and on the street caught Karen's attention. At 8:45 p.m., in the middle of dinner, my doorbell rang repeatedly. "We've received a noise complaint," Karen announced when I opened the door. Behind her stood the same uncomfortable-looking board member. "From whom?" I asked, genuinely confused. We'd been speaking in normal voices, no music playing. "That's confidential," she replied. "But this is your first noise violation. The next one is a $250 fine." I noticed her trying to peer around me into my house. "Is there anything else I can help you with, Karen? How many people do you have over?" she asked, ignoring my question. The HOA bylaws clearly state that gatherings of more than 4 non-residents require advance notice and approval. One of my colleagues, Director Rodriguez from the Cyber Division, appeared behind me. "Is there a problem here?" she asked, her FBI credentials visible on her belt. Karen's eyes widened slightly at the sight of the badge. "This is a private HOA matter," she said, but her voice had lost some of its confidence. "We'll keep it down," I said diplomatically, closing the door before things escalated further. "Who was that?" Rodriguez asked. "The HOA president," I sighed. "She's been on my case since I moved in. Want me to run a background check?" she joked. We all laughed. In retrospect, I should have taken her up on that offer. Last Friday was when everything came to a head. I was hosting a small strategy meeting at my home with a few colleagues. We had case files spread across my dining room table, reviewing evidence for an ongoing investigation. Around 4:30 a.m., all our phones buzzed simultaneously with an emergency alert. A terrorist threat had been detected, and all hands were needed on deck immediately. There was no time to waste. Director Rodriguez had driven to my place, so we all rushed out to her SUV. I jumped into her vehicle with the others, and we sped to headquarters, left my car in the driveway without giving HOA rules a second thought. The day was intense. By 8 p.m., we'd identified the threat, located the suspects, and coordinated with local law enforcement for arrests. After debriefing, I finally called an Uber home around 10:30 p.m., exhausted but satisfied with a job well done. Except when the Uber turned onto my street, my house was there but my driveway was empty. For a moment, I thought I was so tired I'd somehow forgotten where I lived. Then realization dawned. My car had been towed. I immediately called the number on the HOA sign at the neighborhood entrance. To my unsurprised annoyance, Karen herself answered. "Oakwood Estates HOA, Karen speaking." "Karen, it's Alex from 1453 Maple Drive. My car's been towed from my driveway. What's going on?" "Oh, Alex." Her voice dripped with fake concern. "Yes, your vehicle was parked in your driveway all day, which is a violation of Section 8, Paragraph C of our bylaws. Vehicles must be stored in garages during daytime hours when residents are not home. The towing company takes them to their lot on Industrial Boulevard." "Karen, I was called in for an emergency at work. There was no time. The rules apply to everyone, Alex. No exceptions. You can retrieve your vehicle in the morning when they open at 8 a.m. The fee is $275 plus a $50 HOA fine. Cash only for the towing company." She sounded almost gleeful. I took a deep breath, thanked her for the information, and hung up. Then I called my partner Agent Chun to pick me up and drive me to the towing company. "This HOA president sounds like a real piece of work," Chun said as we drove. "You have no idea," I replied, rubbing my temples. "But I'm too tired to deal with this tonight." When we arrived at Pete's Towing, the place was technically closed, but there was a night attendant watching TV in the office. I flashed my credentials through the window, and he quickly opened up. "I need to retrieve a black Ford that was towed from Oakwood Estates tonight," I explained, showing him my ID and vehicle documentation. His eyes widened. Of course, agent. Right away. He looked nervous suddenly. That HOA lady didn't mention it was a government vehicle. I'm not surprised, I said. As he processed the paperwork, he kept glancing anxiously at Chan and me. Look, I don't want any trouble. We have a contract with that HOA. The president calls, we tow. No questions asked. How often does she call? I asked. 3, 4 times a week? She's our most active client. And tonight, she specifically requested my car be towed? He hesitated, then nodded. Said you were a problem resident who needed to learn a lesson. Chun raised an eyebrow at me. I just shook my head. The attendant continued nervously. She also said to check inside the vehicle for contraband. Said she suspected illegal activity. I went completely still. She told you to search a federal vehicle? Yes, sir. But I didn't. I swear. One look at those government plates and I knew better. Smart move, Chin said. As we were inspecting my vehicle to ensure nothing had been disturbed, the attendant approached again, more nervous than before. There's one more thing you should know, he said in a low voice. She offered me a bonus if I found anything suspicious in your car and called her first instead of the police. Chun and I exchanged looks. This had just crossed from annoying to potentially criminal. I think, I said slowly, it's time I had another chat with Karen. I spent Saturday morning making phone calls. First to my supervisor explaining the situation, then to the local police department, and finally to a colleague in the white-collar crime division. By noon, I had quite an interesting picture forming. Karen Wilkinson, 43, had a history of power trips, but nothing criminal on her record. However, the HOA's finances showed some concerning patterns. Over $120,000 in towing fees and fines had been collected in the past year, an astronomical amount for a neighborhood of just 75 homes. Yet the HOA's accounts only showed about half that amount being deposited. Even more interesting was the connection between Pete's towing and Karen's brother-in-law, who happened to be the company's silent partner. The HOA's landscaping contract was with a company owned by her husband, and the approved exterior paint supplier that all homeowners were required to use, owned by Karen's sister. This is a textbook kickback scheme, my white-collar crime colleague explained. She's using the HOA to funnel money to family businesses and probably skimming off the top. Armed with this information, I decided to attend the monthly HOA meeting scheduled for Monday evening. In the meantime, I set up a small camera facing my driveway, just in case Karen decided to escalate further. On Sunday night, she didn't disappoint. My camera caught her walking past my house 3 times, taking photos of my property from different angles. On the last pass, she actually stepped onto my lawn to get a close-up of my front door paint, which was apparently desert tan, instead of the approved Savannah sand. Monday morning, I found another violation notice. $175 for unauthorized paint color. I added it to my growing file. The HOA meeting was held in the community clubhouse. About 30 homeowners were present, most looking as tired and defeated as prisoners at a parole hearing. Karen sat at a table in front, flanked by 4 board members. Before we begin, Karen announced, I'd like to remind everyone that recording these meetings is strictly prohibited. I smiled to myself, knowing that my agency-issued pen was doing exactly that. For 40 minutes, Karen lectured about maintaining property values, community standards, and the importance of following rules. She announced a 20% increase in HOA fees to cover rising administrative costs, and introduced a new fine schedule with significantly higher penalties. When she finally opened the floor for questions, the room remained silent. These people had been beaten into submission. I raised my hand. Alex, Karen acknowledged me with visible displeasure. Our newest resident with the most violations in a single month. Do you have a question about the rules? I do, actually, I said, standing up. I'm curious about the HOA's financial oversight. Who audits the books? Karen's smile faltered slightly. Our treasurer handles the finances. And who is the treasurer? I am, said the uncomfortable-looking man I'd seen with Karen before. When was the last independent audit conducted? I pressed. That's not really appropriate for this meeting, Karen interrupted. If you have concerns about finances, you can submit them in writing. I'm also curious about the contracts with service providers. I continued as if she hadn't spoken. Specifically Pete's Towing, Wilkinson Landscaping, and Prestige Paints. How were these vendors selected? The room, previously lethargic, had gone completely still. Karen's face flushed red. Those were board decisions based on competitive bids, she snapped. Now, if there are no relevant questions. One more, I said, pulling out my credentials and placing them on the table. Special Agent Alex Reynolds, FBI. I'd like to know why you instructed a towing company to search a federal vehicle and report findings to you instead of law enforcement. The room erupted in whispers. Karen's face went from red to white in seconds. I never, she stammered. We have sworn testimony stating otherwise, I said calmly, along with evidence of financial irregularities involving HOA funds. I turned to address the room. For the past 3 weeks, there's been an investigation into suspected embezzlement and fraud involving your HOA funds. Based on preliminary findings, approximately $60,000 in fines and fees collected from you has disappeared in the last year alone. One brave resident called out, "Is that why our pool repairs were delayed due to insufficient funds?" Another added, "And the playground equipment that was supposed to be replaced last summer?" I nodded. Those questions will be part of the investigation. Karen suddenly stood up. This meeting is adjourned, she declared, gathering her papers. Actually, came a voice from the back of the room. It's not. A woman in a suit walked in, flanked by 2 uniformed police officers. Detective Marshall, County Financial Crimes Unit. We have a warrant to seize the HOA's financial records and electronic devices. She held up a document. And this is a restraining order preventing Ms. Wilkinson from accessing any HOA accounts or making financial decisions on behalf of the association. Karen looked like she might faint. This is ridiculous. You can't just. We can and we are, Detective Marshall replied. The FBI has shared evidence of potential wire fraud, which gave us probable cause. As the officers began collecting laptops and files, I addressed the stunned homeowners again. I suggest you hold an emergency election for a new HOA board. In the meantime, all outstanding fines are suspended pending review, and no further towing will be authorized without police approval. The meeting ended with Karen being escorted out, not in handcuffs but certainly in disgrace, as residents bombarded Detective Marshall with stories of abusive fines and selective enforcement. 3 months later, life in Oakwood Estates is dramatically different. Karen, her husband, and the uncomfortable treasurer are facing multiple felony charges for embezzlement, fraud, and conspiracy. The investigation revealed they had stolen over $150,000 from the HOA over 3 years. We have a new HOA board now, comprised of 5 residents who were previously Karen's most frequent targets. They've reduced fees by 30%, eliminated most of the ridiculous rules, and instituted transparent financial practices with quarterly independent audits. As for me, I'm now the neighborhood's de facto security consultant. My car stays in the driveway sometimes, and nobody says a word about it. My front door remains desert tan, and I've added a vegetable garden in my backyard that would have given Karen an aneurysm. The best part? I finally attended a genuinely fun neighborhood barbecue last weekend. As I watched kids playing freely without fear of fines and neighbors chatting without looking over their shoulders, one of the new board members raised a toast. To Alex, who taught us all that sometimes the shadiest thing in a neighborhood isn't the person breaking the rules. It's the person making them. I just smiled and sipped my beer. After years of chasing international criminals, Who would have thought my most satisfying case would be in my own driveway? Thank you for watching. Please let us know in the comments if you liked it, and see you next time.